Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Be Relieved, where we explore how the body, brain, and environment work together to restore balance, resilience, and healing. Today's episode is especially powerful because we're talking about something that most people underestimate in the healing process, which is movement. Not just exercise, but the way motion, fascia, and somatic awareness directly influence the nervous system, emotional memory, and even how trauma is stored and released from the body. I am so honored to have you guys here. Make sure you are following us and subscribing so you are notified every time we release a new episode. Our guest today is Kristin Maloney, counselor, psychotherapist, founder of a successful psychology practice, and an educator specializing in trauma, grief, intergenerational healing, and somatic awareness. She brings together neuroscience, psychology, equine therapy, and movement based on approaches to help people understand how emotional experiences are not just remembered by the mind, but encoded in the body. Kristin will be one of our featured speakers at our March 15th event. It's called Be Relief, the healing power of movement, where we'll explore how movement, fascia release, and body-based awareness unlock both physical and emotional healing. Let's step into this conversation. Thank you so much, Kristin, for being here. We're so honored to have you here today. How does trauma get stored in the body from a neurobiological and somatic perspective?
So I think we need to understand that trauma comes from a Greek word, which is about wounding. And how does that store in the body? It stores in low self-esteem, with nightmares, panic attacks. All of those things are symptomatic of someone being exposed to any sort of trauma. So I have a little saying that I use from a somatic perspective: what the mind feels, the body reveals. So what happens to us in our body 90 seconds later is recorded in our brain. That can continue on for years.
I can see that. I think from a health science lens, this aligns with what we know about memory being distributed across the nervous system, the connective tissue, and even cellular signaling, not just the brain. What role does fascia play in holding emotional tension and unresolved stress?
So fascia is like a connective tissue which wraps our organs. What happens with that when we don't deal with that stress or don't learn ways to release it and release that trauma, that fascia hardens. So you'll often hear people say they've hardened their heart, or they have hardened arteries, or, when someone hurts themselves, or the surrounding tissue is quite hardened because it adapts to be more rigid and protective when we don't release that trauma from our body. So it's like a protection. Yeah, it's like a protection is what it is. Yes.
Going to say that it's so fascinating how it can be a protective layer. And also it's fascinating how fascia isn't just structural, it's highly hydrated and responsive to emotional states.
Absolutely.
How does movement help complete stress responses that were interrupted during trauma?
So trauma sits in our body, and it's like a protection for us. It becomes rigid. Our bodies become rigid. You'll often hear someone say, I have a very sore back, or I constantly have sore shoulders. That's because the tissue in the body, again, becomes rigid. If we don't move that and we don't do anything with that, that becomes our way of being. It's like, I don't move it, so it stays stuck in that form. If we know that if we can do things like going outside, going for a walk, it takes 5 minutes a day to start the process of healing and allowing that trauma to leave our body to a certain degree, not completely, by movement.
Wow. I think this speaks directly to how the autonomic nervous system seeks completion and regulation, not really suppression in a sense. Can you explain the concept of somatic awareness and why feeling the body is essential for emotional regulation?
So, somatic awareness is about like our breathing slows down or heightens. There's tension in our bodies. Our emotions are physiological before they're cognitive. When we don't regulate those emotions, again, like I'm saying to you, they become stuck in our nervous system. And they are passed down through generations. So let me give you an example. When we talk about transgenerational trauma, what happens in our bodies is we store that trauma in our bodies. So say in a woman's case, she is going to have a baby. There's the woman that's having the baby. There's the baby inside her. And that baby is then making the sperm or the ovaries for the next generation. So there's your 3 generations of trauma. If we don't learn to release that trauma and do something with it, it goes on and on and on. And that's when we see the negative outcomes in our health.
I really relate to that because that was a intentional decision for me. I don't have any children yet, but I plan to have children soon. But I wanted to deal with I want to say all my trauma, but I think that that's a continuous journey, you know. But I wanted to not be a broken mom having children or having so much trauma that I'm passing that on to my children. So I made a conscious decision to make sure that I am healthy, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually before having a child. Now, I think it's a continuous journey, so I won't be 100%, but I am definitely more healed than getting started. So much of modern psychology has focused on cognition, like you mentioned, but the body is often where the truth shows up first. So, from your work in grief and transgenerational or intergenerational trauma, how are emotional patterns passed down through the nervous system and behavior?
So if you're somebody that has high anxiety, you then pass that on to your child because it takes that up when it's in utero. We know that when a baby is in utero, it will help to heal the mother, but we have to allow that to happen. If you're not conscious of, like you were saying before, I want to have all that trauma out of my body, that's physically not possible for us to do that because we live in a very fast society. Trauma people are exposed to a lot of things. What we need to learn is how do I store that trauma and how do I release that? And that's when we talk about movement and being conscious of what's actually happening in our body. Then we can be conscious of what's happening in our mind. And when we are, we allow neural pathways to reform. So let me give you one more example. When a child is born, if it's born to a very traumatized mother or a mother that's had an addiction or whatever, if we learn to cuddle that baby and we learn to release some of our own emotions, that baby's neural pathways will reform from birth. Okay. And I think that's where we see that baby can heal itself, but it also helps to heal us. Yeah. I think often we need to hear that there are pathways to healing rather than such a negative association with trauma. And I think that's what, as you would say, from our psychological teachings, we learn there's a trauma and everyone comes and wants to get through that trauma. I don't think we actually ever completely get that out of our body. I think we learn to handle it better.
Right. I agree. Yeah. I think this connects deeply to epigenetics and how stress signaling can alter gene expression across generations. So I kind of see that parallel. How does movement based therapy differ from talk therapy us- in accessing trauma stored below conscious awareness?
Okay. When we allow our bodies to move, it decreases our stress. So let me give you a quick example. When you go for a walk, you get sun on your skin, so you get vitamin D. You actually see people, you talk to people, so you are lifting your head up, you're actually conversing. There are very simple ways that we can teach our body to release from that by being conscious of where we store it. Yeah. I think one of the things that I think in talk therapy that I found is going over and over and over what has happened to us, particularly if we're talking about someone who suffered, trauma from a war, or trauma from sexual abuse, or trauma from living in a very hostile environment in their home. Continually going over and over and over re-triggers the brain. I think when we allow that brain to process things and be outside, go for a walk. Often I will go and sit in the paddock with someone because I do equine therapy, and I'll go and sit outside. We don't necessarily have to do anything with that, but just being outside allows that person to feel the air, see that, life isn't all bad. And I think that's what we need to learn.
For sure. This also reminds me that because language operates in the cortex, but trauma is often encoded in subcortical and sensory motor pathways, that just came to mind as you're speaking about that. But what happens in the brain and body when someone begins to feel safe enough to move or release and express?
Physically, the trauma in that body lessens. The stress in that body lessens. They feel safer. They're able to problem solve. We know that the nervous system it then regulates better. Because I think when we suffer any sort of trauma, we are always more hypervigilant when we're out. What happens with that? People often end up reclusive and all that because it's a safer place to be. So I think when we use our bodies, we become aware of where the pain is, but we also learn how to release that pain.
Right. I think safety is the biological gateway to healing.
Yes.
Yeah, without it, the nervous system stays in protection mode.
Absolutely.
How does practices like equine therapy, yoga therapy, or dance-based movement help regulate the nervous system?
Okay, so we know one of the things that with equine therapy that happens is when you walk into a paddock, the horse picks up the energy in your body from 10 to 15 feet away. Okay, so if you're hypervigilant, your breathing's accelerated, that horse will breathe and lessen its breathing and breathe with you. It's a very simple process and has, I think, some great outcomes. I think when we talk about any sort of movement, yoga works on your breathing, which makes you conscious of how we breathe into our chest rather than our stomachs. It teaches us how to breathe differently, how to slow our breathing down. It also allows our muscles to release their tension. And all of that helps us with where we store the trauma in our body.
Wow, yeah. These modalities seem to bypass intellectualization, I guess. I was trying to figure out the word for it, just intellect, and go straight to embodied regulation. What are early signs in the body that someone is carrying unresolved emotional or generational stress?
Okay, so breathing is one of the first ones that we see. You'll see that person often have asthma. You'll see that they have hypertension in their shoulders. There'll be muscle tension. You'll see that person takes time for their brain to engage. They will struggle with their child. They will struggle with school, with understanding things. There are lots of physical things that show up with unresolved trauma.
One of our speakers from last month, her name is Kay Miller, and she said that often the body whispers long before it starts to scream. And I feel like it definitely does that through chronic symptoms.
Absolutely. And I was going to say to you before, I think we've become very arrogant in the Western society of suggesting that we can deal with this trauma and we can release it just by you sitting here talking to me. And I don't believe that's a fact. I think talking helps, but I think we have to absolutely get up and be physical to allow, first of all, to feel where that trauma is in our body, to learn how to release it.
I agree with that.
I think we've learned so much about medicalizing every single thing that we do. I'll give you a tablet and that will fix you up. And I think all that does is suppress your trauma, suppress your stress, but I don't.
Yeah, I agree for sure. At our March 15th event, what will participants learn about using movement and somatic awareness as a tool for long-term emotional resilience?
I think one of the things that I would like people to learn is that trauma is not a life sentence. If we do things and learn how to reframe it, how to use our brain in a different way, we learn to process it and heal as much as we can heal. I don't think we ever become non-traumatized. I think that's possible, but I think we can learn how to reframe it, how to do things differently, and how to accept that we actually are the destiny of our own body, and what the mind feels, the body reveals. Look at what it's revealing, and look at how we can heal it.
Wow, I agree with that, and I can't wait myself for the event. I feel like everyone needs to hear this message. I think this is about giving people tools, even myself tools, that they can carry into daily life, not just a moment of insight, like you said. Kristen, this conversation makes it clear that healing is not just something we think our way through. It's something we move through, something we feel through, and repattern through the body. At our upcoming event, Be Relieved, The Healing Power of Movement on March 15th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be diving deeper into how the fascia, nervous system regulation, and somatic awareness can help release trauma, regulate emotions, and restore the body's natural capacity for resilience. This isn't just about flexibility or fitness, it's about teaching the nervous system that it's safe again. And when the body feels safe, it can finally let go of what's been holding on for generations. We can't wait to continue this journey with you. I am excited for March. I feel like I need to hear this just as much as our audience. Thanks so much for coming and talking with us today. And thank all of you for listening. Once again, this is Ashley Nicole, your health scientist, and I cannot wait to see you guys on March 15th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll put the link below for you to sign up. Thanks so much. We see you guys soon.